Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya. I'm a professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. Today, it is my great delight to introduce to you Mayor William Peduto, Mayor of the City of Pittsburgh in southwestern Pennsylvania. Over the past few decades, Pittsburgh has diversified its economy from one reliant on heavy industries to a hub for higher education, healthcare, and financial services. Mayor Peduto will discuss governing during the COVID-19 crisis, the Marshall Plan for Middle America, and what lies ahead for our region. Mayor Peduto, welcome to the show.
Thank you, CB.
Some time earlier, we had interviewed your Chief Resilience Officer, Grant Irwin, but that was over 8 months ago. Could you walk us through some of the challenges that have been unique to Pittsburgh during the pandemic?
When you're looking at the epidemic, it really starts back last January when cities around the world were first notified what was happening in Wuhan and how it had the potential to go global. So we began working very early with the Center for Disease Control. And what they had offered us was advice in doing scenario planning. In other words, how would we be able to react if our employees would have to work from home? Who would be essential to have a laptop, a cell phone, the different types of materials? How would our systems handle the ability of working from a distant location? What would we do if 40% of our public works crew or our police force wasn't able to show up for work? How would we pick up the trash? All these different types of areas. So we got a head start in February and March. And by the time that April came around, we were ready. So the scenario planning and the preparation work that the city of Pittsburgh took on early in January was absolutely essential for having a seamless transition to a work from home scenario. Secondly, the city is not in charge of health and human services, the county is. So we were able to focus in strictly and primarily on the public safety of the pandemic and being able to assure that we were able to respond quickly to any type of an emergency, but especially with those that may have contracted COVID. We created a new operation plan that was created by our EMS division, and that plan itself was adopted by Dr. Birx in the work that she was doing in working with cities around the country.
So, moving into the Marshall Plan for Middle America, which is our other conversation topic for today, could you begin by briefly summarizing the plan to our listeners who may only be hearing about it for the first time?
The Marshall Plan for Middle America is the understanding that the world is moving in one direction, and that is toward renewable energy and green technology. And that the area in our country that will be either left behind or harmed the most are the areas where the fossil fuel industry has been for multiple generations. In our region, that's Northern Appalachia and the Ohio Valley.
What role do cities play in elevating the concerns and opportunities for the broader region?
A city by itself really doesn't have much of a say when it comes to national economic development strategies, national job or national climate initiatives. But when cities work together across a broad area of the nation, they're able to stimulate the conversation in Washington and potentially steer the legislation. The city of Pittsburgh is working with 7 other cities throughout Northern Appalachia and the Ohio Valley, and they include Huntington, West Virginia, Morgantown, West Virginia, Columbus, Dayton, Youngstown, and Cincinnati, Ohio, and Louisville, Kentucky. And there's a common bond between all of our cities, whether it is through the economy of extraction or through trade and heavy industry along the Ohio Valley and through the entire region. We're connected and our economies are connected. So when we talk about having a coordinated plan, we realize that that coordination means more than just us working together, but it means Washington and our state capitals being a partner with us in order to make big change happen.
Now, the other complicating factor here is, of course, that the Marshall Plan for Middle America, was released, and of course, the Center for Sustainable Business was at the helm of things here, was released during a global pandemic, right? Uh, in some ways, the pandemic has further emphasized the need for resilient communities and a clean economy that works for everyone, right? So, what are your thoughts on this connection, especially as it relates to social equity? I mean, is this serendipity?
I think that there is. I think that, on a local basis, as we look as to how our economy rebounds coming out of COVID, we're looking both at a micro level, meaning the areas that have been hit the hardest, the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, the entertainment industry, but also at a greater macro level, our overall economy of our regions. And those regions are connected, like I had said earlier. Looking at the tea leaves in Washington, it appears that the Biden administration will be taking bold action on an infrastructure plan by the end of the year, which means we have a very short window in order to make the Marshall Plan part of this, what is expected to be $2 trillion initiative. And we can provide that type of opportunity for the federal government to make investment that will have a resounding effect. The report that you created and with the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Massachusetts Amherst has proven that over the next 10 years, we will lose 100,000 jobs in the energy sector if we do nothing. 40,000 of those jobs will come from West Virginia alone. But if to invest in public-private partnerships, investing in the companies that are presently here and those that want to move here, we can create 400,000 jobs in those same 10 years. It's an investment that will pay off for the long-term health of our region and our economy.
What are some next steps that we can expect here?
We've been in conversation with our congressional representatives about pulling together a meeting within the next few weeks to having Congress members from the 4 states that have been studied to get that conversation going within committees that will be a part of the stimulus package. The package that I'm talking about is the infrastructure package that will be introduced sometime during the third or fourth quarter of 2021. So it's not too soon to start lobbying the Marshall Plan as a component of it. On the other side, we've been working with Reimagine Appalachia, a grassroots organization that is working through on the ground environmental and labor organizations to build up the critical ground support to be able to help to get this initiative recognized in Washington. If we can get that started this quarter and the second quarter, and as we look at the third and the fourth, as the bill is put in final form, we have an opportunity to be a part of that infrastructure legislation. It will then be incumbent for each of the states to start looking at what type of programs we can create through tax incentives at a state level to be able to complement grants and loans at the federal level.
What is the most important message you want to convey to corporate leadership who are listening in at this time?
It's an understanding that if we work together, if we recognize the direction that the world is going, if we help to have companies which have been around for over 100 years and have helped to sustain communities throughout our area to be able to increase their portfolio and at the same time assure that they'll be around for the next 50 years. If we can pull all of that together and get environmentalists and labor leaders on to an agreement of how our region can meet the Paris goals and be able to create jobs, I think it is worth pursuing through a bipartisan approach the type of investment that we're talking about in Washington.
Right? And companies as well, along with all the other stakeholders, should stand to gain from such investments. And finally, then, what call to action would you make to our other listeners?
When it comes to the Marshall Plan, number one, be informed. The report is online. There are social media outlets to be able to get updates about discussion around it and similar type of legislation. And when the call to action comes later in this year, when it requires the votes of Congress members on both sides of the aisle, have your voice heard.
Mayor Peduto, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, CB.
And this is your host, CB Bhattacharya, saying goodbye, and please join us for our next edition of Sustaining Sustainability. And before I sign off, I do want to say that this podcast is made possible by the help of my colleagues, Leslie Marshall, who's the Associate Director of the Center for Sustainable Business, and Alyssa Martinec, who is the Sustainability Coordinator of the Center for Sustainable Business. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya. Bye-bye.